Hey there, everyone. I'm Secborn. Welcome to my channel where we're going to take a closer look at all things scraping related, code, and general security. If you're here, you're probably interested in how to protect web data or just curious about what scraping actually is. Today, we're unpacking some of those ins and outs about scraping, why it happens, the tactics, and what we can kind of do to help mitigate that. There will be a fun little quick demo here at the end to help visualize some of these concepts, so let's get started. At its core, scraping is using some form of automation to help pull information off of websites. Companies sometimes do it to collect useful data, like protecting pricing across or product pricing, I should say, across competitors or other legitimate uses too that you can think about are for law enforcement or research purposes. But there is that little bit of a shadier side where attackers scrape to collect personal information from emails, phone numbers, often with this intent to sell them or use it for spam on other platforms. So while scraping itself isn't really inherently that bad, just allowing anybody to grab huge amounts of data could pose some risks. And this is kind of where scraping comes in. Basically, anti-scraping is just a set of tools and strategies designed to help making scraping harder or really just at least inconvenient, because the reality is we can't really completely block all scraping, but we can certainly make it more of a hassle. And really, for scrapers, if it takes too much time and effort, they're more likely to just move on to their next target or task or whatever they're trying to do. And now these ideas are pretty straightforward when you're dealing with a smaller application, but once you're protecting an app with millions of users across different locations, things can get really complex. So you really have to balance protection with the user experience, and too many restrictions and legitimate users will just get frustrated and just leave. So a lot of this is about finding that nice little sweet spot. So anti-scraping really boils down to five main pillars, and I'll try to go through each one to hopefully make as much sense as possible. This first one here, you want to kind of require authentication, and this means that you have to log in to access certain data. It's like putting up a gate or a checkpoint. If you know who's coming in, it's going to be a whole lot easier to monitor and catch anyone misusing that access. Here next, you want to enforce rate limits. So allowing users or bots to hit your servers endlessly is pretty risky. So rate limiting controls how many users can actually make requests, or how many requests a user can actually make, I should say. And it's never as simple, again, as one option fits all. If it's too strict, you end up blocking real legitimate users who just want to use your app. It's really comes back to that balancing act between usability and hardening. Next, here you want to lock down account creation. This stops people from making a ton of accounts to scrape data, because if you think about it, a lot more of that juicier data being targeted is often only accessible through authenticated queries. So even just adding that extra step or two in the sign up flow can go a long way in preventing that bot army creation. Next is enforce data limits. Limiting how much data you can actually grab per session is another really good way to help put that inconvenient speed bump for scrapers. That way they can't just take everything at once, trying to load in thousands and thousands of usernames or whatever they might be in one go. And lastly, here we have returning generic error messages. So these error messages that you show really do matter, and giving vague error messages makes it a lot harder and really inconvenient for scrapers to understand what went wrong, further adding to that layer of inconvenient friction. And to really understand anti-scraping, it helps to put ourselves in the scraper's shoes. What are they trying to go for? What are they looking for? What are they after, etc.? And generally, when scrapers start, they are going to begin by analyzing that traffic that's going on in the background with tools like Burp Suite, Zap, or a similar proxying tool, looking to further answer things like, is authentication required? Meaning, do I need to be authenticated, or can I access this data without logging in? Because in general, logged out scraping is easier to scale, as it's easier to rotate IPs rather than to try to create that bot army to rotate accounts. They're also looking at how much data is available. They're after quantity, so the more they can grab per response or per session, the better. They're really looking to get the best bang for their buck. And another thing to take into account is the data structure and how easy it is to parse. Well-organized data is a scraper's dream. Sometimes just renaming tags or using obscure naming conventions can really make things inconvenient for scrapers and bots to really understand what's going on. And knowing these priorities gives us that further insight into where we should be trying to tighten our defenses So let's move on to the demo where we're going to be using a GraphQL app that is set up to mimic a social media environment. It's designed to feel like the kinds of platforms we're typically familiar with, but in a closed off, controlled way. And we've got everything we'll need here, from user profile posts, comments, likes, all that fun stuff, all kind of created randomly or generated randomly to keep it as realistic as possible. We're going to be accessing this endpoint on a local host to see how we can interact with the data in various ways. And it's really going to be focusing on a high level, very easy or very straightforward misconfiguration that would be something that Scraper really attaches to, and then scrape and then also leverage that for the bot spamming. And so that's what we're really going to be getting into. So let's go ahead and jump in. Alrighty, so let me pull up the window to start this app. So let's go to cd temp, and then we can start that app and get that fired up, and we should see it pop up here soon. We're all good to go. Localhost on port 5000. And let me set up the scenario a little bit. So we'll be end up using a username John whose ID will equal 8, and we're going to be using this guy here, John, to try to see another person's access token, which an access token is going to be needed to make a lot of these requests. And we're going to see if we can do or see someone else's access keys, which we will end up being able to with the intended misconfiguration. So with all that said, we can cd into temp, and then I'm only cding here for the scripts we have later, but here we can first put in something to look at, maybe the schema with the metadata. And this essentially, this right here, once it runs, it's just a command that gives you kind of that map of what data the post structure can actually hold and how it's actually organized. It's useful for when you're trying to understand the data layout. It's kind of like looking at the directory and knowing what exactly is going to be able to happen or what you can do. And we have that one that we can run real quick, and then we also have another one that's it's similar. However, this one is going to be showing you the main ways you can query data. So on this, you can do some specific inputs on each, and it's kind of like getting that menu of the APIs available for questions. So helping you kind of understand what you can ask for and the data for each of the query that is kind of required to make that question and to be able to get the correct answer you want back. But first, let's go ahead and jump in and see our user John here and user 8 and see who that is. And it's James. But see, we're James, user 8, and we can actually, instead of just getting the name, there's also some of that other information that's available, your email, or John's email, I should say. And if I knew how to spell email correctly, that would probably help. Email. And we get the email. And then we can also do access token. Oh, wait, I think it's access key. Yep, it's access key. We do access key. There we go. I just don't know how to type right now. Did you mean access key? It's because I didn't spell access right. And then we can see that James, the user that we're playing with, there's his access key. And what we can do is try to see user 9 and see what it says. Shouldn't let us. Yeah, access key invalid. So we can't actually see that. Let me kind of show what's actually going on here. So we have the schema, and there's a bunch of resolvers just basically showing how this, or allowing us to be able to do a lot of what we're being able to do. And here again at a high level, like I was saying, it's going to be very simple in the fact that you can pretend that a dev did something, maybe they fat fingered or didn't implement something as they should have, or as simple as they were testing, and to make their life easier, they just commented out the access key needs and they forgot to uncomment it back. So we can save that, let that reload, and we should see an update here that restarting because it detected a change is up and active. So now if we try that same command again to be able to see user 9, because remember we were user 8, we try again with user 9 to see, or user 8's access key to be able to see user 9's information, and we can see it. And so as a scraper, that's something, this is just showing it again at a high level. I found something that I want to hook onto and scrape. And now that we found something that is scrapable, we would ideally, see, okay, how many users are there, how many user IDs I can get, and then how many access keys I can get. Because in my mind, I'm going to want to scrape and then posing as those users, push out some spam that I want people to go and visit a malicious fake link. So we have here a scraper script, and basically this is just designed to gather the information about the multiple users, and specifically it's going after their tokens, but it's going to be able to send all this in parallel and be able to get it as fast as possible. And there's really only, I think, 10 different users here. I made it small enough to be able to do this demo and do it quickly. You can always add more users, but I think 10 gets the point across. And so we can go back to our little terminal here, and we can do Python, we can do scraper. And this should send, so like I was saying, it's going to iterate over the IDs. It's only going to send 10 requests. So it's not really iterating, but it's going to send 10 requests. And so like I was saying, it's going to go over and send the 10 different user IDs, and it's going to send it 10 times. And we should be able to get back all of the IDs in a nice little pretty format. So let's go ahead and run that. That's running. Hopefully we get back. We did. We get an output of all these keys, their email, their name, their IDs. Wonderful. So, excuse me. So now we can go back and we can actually now look at the bot. So as a scraper, now I have everything I need. Now I'm going to try to use all those keys to be able to see or to send out a specific message that I want. In particular, someone to go check out a totally not malware, don't click me link, and hoping that they do click it and go visit, and it can lead to further implications and consequences. So all this is really doing is, again, it's just a straightforward way of just putting those keys in a nice list. If it was a bigger list with like so many more users, probably just put that in a text document and have the script pull it from that document. But it's really just those 9 or 10 different IDs and access keys. And then, so again, it's going to send all those, and it's going to send the message as the user that the key is associated with. So even though you're going to see that it says a bot post by James, but it's going to be for the user Sophia or the other people's names, Alice, Jane, etc. So what we can now do is also run this guy. So that was scraper. We can do bot. We do that. And all these messages were posted successfully. And so we can see that once we actually can, now we can actually see some of the new posts. So first we can see the newer posts. This should be 60. Yep, because there was only those 50 to begin with, I believe. So these should say, yes, it was a check out this totally safe post by James, but it was for James Martinez. Oh, that was because that user already exists, or he did it as himself. And then Sophia or the ID of the user and the name of Sophie actually posted this. Alice posted the same message. Bob posted the same message. So in a nutshell, you're really seeing how a scraper can find something that they want to hook onto. They exploit it, they leverage it, and then for something like this, they're going to send out spam messages posing as legitimate users. And then that can just continue to spread like wildfire. So that's really what's going on here. And so that was kind of that quick demo. And just to wrap it up, I hope this really gave people a clear look at how these techniques can really work in practice. So again, as a really quick recap for the pillars or the core principles, you want to require authentication, enforce rate limits, lock down account creation, enforce data limits, and return generic messages. And again, these are the main strategies to help make things harder and more inconvenient without disrupting real users. Thanks again for sticking around. If this was helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and feel free to drop any questions in the comments. See you in the next one.